Wake up. It's time for Primal Scream.
Welcome back to the Primal Scream. I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
And today we have a very special little treat.
Can't wait.
Is it like a jerky treat? It's not a jerky treat.
A jerky treat.
It's a treat. It's a yummy treat. It's an unexpected, flavorful treat.
Like the dessert that we unwrapped that was Denise Stapley? You talking about that?
She was a present.
She was a present that you unwrapped.
Present that I unwrapped, which sounds really sexy. Dr. David Moen.
I'm sure
he might be sexy.
I'm sure he is.
But he's not in the room with us, so I don't know how. I can't unwrap him.
We can assume that he's a pretty accomplished guy. He's probably pretty sexy.
But Dr. David Moen, who was on TED Talk, which, Todd, is that where your wife heard of Dr. David Moen?
No, she was at a conference, and she said, you really like this guy. He was funny. He kind of had some good stories, but he also had a lot of good information. He had some good stories about the Affordable Care Act, things like that, and she knew that we had talked about it. And so, again, on a whim, I sent him an email, and
he accepted.
And he accepted.
You know what?
Which I'm still a tad shocked about, but that's just because I'm new to this.
The thing that we need to take away from this is that if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Absolutely.
If you don't ask, you could be that fat kid with zits all over your face in high school, and you want to ask that pretty girl to prom, and hey, dude, if you don't ask,
she's never going to say
yes.
The
answer is always no.
Yeah.
And so just like that fat zit-faced kid.
I would say thank you so much for the comparison. How'd you know? How'd you know?
You know what? You just got to ask. You just got to jump up and say, hey, I'm interested in this. I think you're an exciting, neat dude or woman. And hey, I'm Matt or Todd. Come talk to us on the podcast.
I never said this, but I went and saw Amy Schumer perform in Chicago, the comedian.
Yeah.
And she made a comment that my wife just died laughing at, which was, she said, "I just love to meet a guy and him not ask me to be on his podcast." And I literally
really?
had just been thinking about how good it would be to meet her and ask her if she'd be on the podcast. And then she literally says that, and my wife dies laughing. And I didn't even laugh because I was like, oh shit, that's me.
I can't do that. That's so funny. Dude, that is so funny.
Yeah, it was really a hilarious comment. Which made me think two things. There's a lot of podcasters out there, or there's a lot of podcasters involved or like Amy Schumer. I'm not sure which one. But I thought that was kind of funny that she made that comment.
Well, you know what the secret is? The secret is it has to be just a hangout.
It does.
Interviews.
Well, I mean, that's why
interviews.
I get a little nervous sometimes when we have like authors like Leah Dunham on, or when we have the doctor on. It's just they're professionals and they're involved in situations. I mean, she's an author, he's a doctor. These are their professions, what they do. And
subject matter experts.
Yeah, and so I do get a little nervous that our shtick and the way we do things isn't always congruent to that. But at the same time, there are people who listen to us that you made the point of last podcast who might not even have thought about things or a certain way, and then they hear somebody talk about it and like, okay, so I am bringing some information of things that we are interested in. Right. So I think it's exciting.
Well, what you're going to see at home is on YouTube when we post this video is what you're going to see is this. We're very calm, relaxed, funny, silly. And then Dr. David Moen comes on. And what you don't know is that we already had him on. We recorded him first, and now we're recording this. And what you'll see is this guy freaking out. I couldn't breathe. I was nervous. And one of the big reasons was we had this big technical snafu, wires everywhere. I'm trying to figure out what to plug into what to make the...
It was a little stressful.
An hour and a half of plugging stuff into every orifice I could think of.
Besides your own?
Besides my own. And I finally... I don't know how. It almost makes me get spiritual because somehow I plugged the right thing in and everything just kind of snapped into place. And we were a little late.
Talking to the doctor. A little late. Yeah, I feel... Trying to be unprofessional. It happens.
Right. It just happens.
And he was cool about it because he emailed me. I emailed him, said we're having some technical difficulties. And he said, I'm just sitting here reading a medical journal on geographical statistics of something or other, and I was like, awesome, glad you're reading something exciting.
Yeah.
I'll get a hold of you
Yeah.
as soon as I can.
Yeah, as soon as Matt pulls his head out of his ass, we will be right with
Hey,
you.
dude, you did a great job. Listen,
Hey,
I sat
really appreciate
I
it.
sat over here and downloaded the Kindle app to my computer so I could read the book that I'm reading.
Yeah.
While you were in the corner freaking out, and
Trying to find hair to pull out.
And I just thought, I'll just be quiet and calm. If he needs me, I'll help him however I can.
At first, when we were doing this, you were talking, and I was sitting over there plugging different stuff in and clicking on the computer and trying to figure stuff out and making sure that the preferences were set correctly. And you're talking, and all I could think about was, if you could just shut the fuck up for 10
You just got to
seconds.
say that.
I didn't have to, because once I got to that point to where I was about ready to say it, you did. But
Which is
anyway,
scary.
it all worked out. It all worked out.
Yeah.
Thank God for Radio Shack, which is 5 minutes from my house. I just ran over there, grabbed a cable, run back.
What's today?
Can I look?
No.
I know it's April. I know it's in April, and is it like the 22nd, 23rd, 24th?
24th. Good job. April
I knew
20th.
it was in the 20s.
April
somewhere.
24th. Nice. Yeah.
And since we've already had the doctor on, I can say this. What you guys are going to hear might not be what you expect to hear.
Yeah.
Because I was very pleasantly surprised. When we started, again, my anxiety was up. I just had figured out the whole computer mixer snafu. So I couldn't hardly breathe. And you'll sense that. You'll see that.
And maybe you'll see me say, take a deep breath.
And just breathe,
Just
dude.
relax. It'll be all right.
Yeah, because I thought it wasn't going to happen. But once it did happen and we were talking, Dr. David Moen.
I knew. I mean, from what I was told, when I had heard, and from his TED Talks and reading his blogs, I liked the casual way he does things, but the compassion and the idea of understanding and empathy that comes through with the care that he's giving people.
That's the overwhelming sense.
Absolutely. And if it seems such a simple thing. It's like it makes you go, oh, well, yeah, of course we need to do that. You and I have talked all the time about being more understanding, more thoughtful, more compassionate.
Dude, I need to work on that with my kids.
We all need to work on that with our
Jesus.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll go into it. We kind of advertise this as understanding the Affordable Care Act. We talk about it.
Well, and he wasn't, Mr. Happy Pants about the Affordable Care Act either. He thought there were parts that needed to happen.
Things.
And the way that it was working before wasn't working very well. So in my mind, he didn't say this verbatim, but in my mind, it's better than nothing at all, and something needed to change. So I think that the idea behind the Affordable Care Act is probably a good thing. But, I mean, again, the idea of legislating everything to try to fix stuff isn't always the way that it needs to work out.
And he talks about that. So stay tuned for that when we talk to Dr. David Moen. But for right now, current events, what's going on in the world today?
I don't know. What's going on?
Are you shitting me? No, I always rely on you for this stuff.
I'm kidding. There's lots happening right now.
What about the blood moon?
Well, I know it's... Well, are you talking about important information or...
Dude, some people...
Is the apocalypse happening?
Some people... No, but some people freak the fuck out. Some people thought it was an amazingly beautiful, natural... Oh my God.
You mean the lunar eclipse?
The moon looked blood red.
Right.
Yes, which happens every so often. But some people freak out about it and get all end of days. And some people are like, look what type of beautiful thing Mother Nature gives us. I mean, I say Mother Nature, but I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, because of our atmosphere, because of all the things, the stars align in a certain way, and it gives us this view, this vision of the moon looking blood red. And I thought that was really pretty neat.
Oh, I thought it was awesome. And then there was also, what was that meteor shower that happened a night ago? It was also a pretty cool thing about the meteor shower.
Really? There was a meteor shower?
Yeah, it's the one that happens every year. It's the sky is just full. But of course, it was raining here, so we didn't get a chance to see it. But that's okay.
Okay. So on RT, and again, take it with a grain of salt, everybody. I mean, everything is going to be skewed one way or another. So do your own fact finding, do your own digging. Be your own little journalist. But on RT, they have a story about the FCC denies plans to kill net neutrality. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, so that we all have access to the internet and it's not, filtered through somebody else.
So basically they're saying that no, they're not planning on killing that aspect where everybody would have. Well, I think what? They also I'm sorry. But it wasn't the FCC. I was going to say, but they've also said they weren't spying on us. But that was the NSA.
Right. That was the NSA. It's still the federal government, a piece of it. So
right. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, one person says, no, we're not gathering all your data.
Right.
And then a couple weeks later, he's like, oh, that data? Sorry. Yeah. Right. No, we were. But I didn't think you meant, but yes, we are.
Well, I think you're right, absolutely. But I think another thing that happened good this week was the running of the
Bulls?
the Boston Marathon.
Oh,
I think that's pretty cool because it was kind of a big tragedy that happened, and
some jackass had a black backpack and he had stuff in it to make it look like he was gonna. Like he was redoing,
and somebody said that it was like art. He was trying to do something, or I was like,
that's not fucking artistic.
I know, but I mean, you have to. In my mind, I'm just like, you think somebody has an idea of like, oh, I'm gonna do something dramatic and show how we've moved past this and all this stuff without pausing to say, maybe this is pretty tactless. Way to go. But I wanted to give a shout out to Rick Colton from CrossFit 2.2, who actually ran the Boston Marathon from our gym and did a really nice job as well. So,
did you hear about the teenager who tweeted about bombing an airline?
No.
All right, I'm googling it really quick. I mean, I heard the story, but I kind of want to have some facts here.
I hear you.
But
Rick ran the. Can I say that Rick ran the marathon in 3 hours? Yeah, he ran the marathon in 3 hours and 36 minutes.
God damn it!
Isn't that great? You know how fast I ran mine? 6 hours and 12 minutes. I doubled him. That's sad. That's sad.
Okay, so I want to have it on the air right now.
Go ahead.
We're going to talk about it. Or not. I totally lost my train of thought. No, it's the Tough Mudder. Oh. God damn it. In a couple of weeks, as soon as this podcast goes out, basically what's going to happen, today's what?
The 24th.
The 24th. It's Thursday.
Yeah.
It's going to this podcast is going to be posted on a Sunday night or a Monday, and it's roughly 2 weeks from this week that we're doing the Tough Mudder.
Yeah. Very excited.
I
can't wait.
Fucking you right now.
I'm excited, aren't you?
I'm really nervous.
Why?
Well,
I know people who don't run, who loved doing their Tough Mudder, that never prepared to do anything. Now, they were in okay shape, but they weren't out there running 5-10 miles to get prepared for this thing. You jog and you walk in between things. You hang out with your group. You're not by yourself. You're helping people over the wall, people you don't even know. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're doing things in between. So it's a 3-4 hour race, but you're not just like running. The idea of running a half marathon sounds 10 times more horrible than doing this Tough Mudder.
Or half marathon. Or I know this stuff, but I have not prepared myself the way I should. I am doing Denise Stapley a disservice by saying, yeah, I'll be on your team, and I'm going to be a fucking anchor.
No.
You're good.
She's excited. She can't wait to do it. It's a group community activity.
I can't wait to see her.
Dr. Dave will love to hear about how we got to be part of this community.
Yeah, I can't wait to see her.
Tough Mudder has actually said that we could be a media correspondent while we're there, so we can videotape.
We got our media tags. Woo!
We're really excited about it.
I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is all about.
That's a podcast celebration. Thanks.
Yeah, there's microphones and there's beer and laptops, and I don't want to spill beer on a laptop again. So that's my subdued. I'm really excited. That's my visual. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm with you.
My breast?
Your breasts.
My press.
Your press pass?
Pass, yeah.
Oh, I'm with you. I think I cut you off. I'm excited about seeing Denise, too. I'm looking forward to meeting Malcolm from Survivor. I've never met him before, but she's always saying good things about him.
If Denise says great things about somebody and she thinks he's a neat person, I can't wait to...
And his mom's making us T-shirts.
Oh, is that who's making us T-shirts?
Yeah, Malcolm's mom is making us T-shirts that say Tough Mudder on them.
Do we owe her some money or something?
No, we signed up for the Tough Mudder. Now the T-shirt thing, I don't know. We'll have to talk to Denise after that. But she's already got her T-shirt sizes. It's all locked in.
Oh, she does?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, we should probably.
I'm the talent getter. So you don't think I have this shit covered? Come on, man. Let's go.
I apologize.
Okay.
I apologize. Hey,
Thank you for apologizing.
So what hotel are you staying in?
I have no idea.
That's why I'm nervous. That's why I'm nervous.
Hey, listen, I've gone to
Zoom in on my eyes. That's why I'm fucking nervous.
I've gone to triathlons and I didn't have a place to stay, and so I went there the night before because they suggest you take a walk around the track and see because it was an off-road triathlon.
Yeah.
And so I slept in my car. I locked my bike to my car and I slept in it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, but that's you. I actually am bringing my wife and 3 kids.
I know.
So we can't.
Well, then why are you worried about me finding a hotel room? You need to find a family's hotel room.
That's true, but we have a press pass. Okay, so in the news, just real quick, back to what I was talking about before. A Dutch teen. Oh, a teenager from where? From Dutch? From I sound stupid. From Sweden? Is that it? Anyway, she's from Rotterdam. Okay, a Dutch teen, 14, is arrested in Rotterdam for tweeting a joke saying Al-Qaeda bomb threat to American Airlines. Yeah. I understand.
People just want 15 minutes of fame. That's what I think it is.
Do you really think it's a 15 minutes of fame?
Would you?
It's a 14-year-old teenager.
Yeah, it's a kid being stupid and dumb. And I think the repercussions now are just tremendously more than they used to be.
It's kind of like what Dr. David Moen says, which you'll see, is that we overdo our responses to things.
Yeah, and that's obviously a stupid thing, but that kid's going to be in serious trouble for a long time because of that. When back in the day, if he had called in a fire alarm and somebody's at school, he would have gotten in trouble, but he would not have been. At what level do you stop holding children who are still learning that know how to develop brains accountable for something? Yes, he should be held accountable. And
you did hear that when this came out, a ton of other people started making fun of this. I mean, they all kind of jumped onto the bandwagon to show the ridiculousness of her being prosecuted at such a high extent.
Yeah,
for this. I mean, it's a 14. Obviously, if you know immediately that it's a 14-year-old sending you a tweet, okay, we're done. Don't spend any more time investigating it because now you're not spending money. As soon as you know, stop. But they haven't stopped. They've continued to dwell on this subject and this person and this investigation, therefore spending more and more money, and then therefore it's a vicious cycle because then they can say, look how much money you have cost us.
Right.
Bitch, as soon as you knew I was 14, why didn't you just stop?
Right.
Why didn't you just realize I'm dumb?
Or call local police and say, hey, this kid did this. Go pick him up if you need to. Talk to the parents and be done with it.
I'll be honest with you. This is a moment from Matt's past where I was a dumbass. I wasn't even a teenager yet. I was just somebody who had watched horror films, right? A little kid, and I dialed 0, got the operator, and I go, I'm gonna kill you.
Nice.
Yeah, a dumbass, right? Hang up. Now, what I didn't know at that age was that I was fucking calling an operator who could easily hit redial and call me right back. So I did that once or twice, right?
Right.
They call the phone back. I'm like, hello? Hi, hello? Yeah, who is this? I go, oh, this is Matt. Matt, when your parents get home, you're going to have to tell them that you just said all these things to me. And I was like, I just immediately started sweating because you're a kid, just like this 14-year-old girl.
Right.
Or I think it's a girl. It's a 14-year-old teen. You did something stupid. We've all done things that are incredibly stupid. And at the time we thought, oh, this is going to be funny. It's going to be a riot. And then you do it and they're blowing it way out of proportion.
And this is where that thoughtfulness or that compassion comes in, where you can still hold them accountable, let them know how bad it is, but you don't have to be, horrible about it.
Yeah, common sense.
Yeah,
once you realize it's a teenager, slap her hand a little bit or his hand a little bit,
right,
and move on.
It
doesn't have to be a big fucking thing.
Should we get to Dr. David Moen?
Dr. David Moen.
Yeah, he really brought it tonight. It was great.
Yeah. So here we go. Here's Dr. David Moen. Here's our interview. Enjoy. All right. So we are here with Dave Moen, Dr. David Moen.
I'm working in Moen MD Consulting as an independent consultant, and I work with multiple organizations on high-risk patient management, on product design for health plan products, and on care model development, new care models to care for patients more effectively.
All right. Now, could you tell us a little bit more just about you as an individual? Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was what's called a menopause baby. My mom and dad were in their late 40s, and my mom thought it was menopause, and then she went, "Oh no, it's another kid." So I was the sixth kid in a family that my dad was a family physician in a small town up in northern Wisconsin. And as the sixth kid in a busy family in an underserved part of Wisconsin, I became an active part of what I would call the medical home of that era, the 1960s, by about age 10. And grew up watching my dad practice what I thought was really an idealized version of medicine, where relationships really mattered, trust was a key part of the equation. And it was all about caring and compassion, in addition to bringing treatments to patients that were meaningful. And so I went on and went to college at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa.
Nice.
For all you Iowegians out there. And it was a great experience. Loved it there. Met my wife there. And then went on to medical school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And did my residency training at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and I practiced emergency medicine and primary care medicine for 25 years in the Twin Cities market. And about a decade ago, I began really contemplating what is it that I can do with this background and this passion for patient care to try to contribute to changing the system in ways that are meaningful. So I went on and did some leadership training out at Harvard and developed a leadership academy at Fairview Health System, where I was at the time with another couple physicians. And over the course of 5 years, we trained about 250 physicians and other healthcare leaders in new ways of thinking about leadership. I was not trained how to lead people. In my training as a physician, I was trained to treat a person, but not really lead a group of people. So we really tried to develop and successfully developed leadership training for clinicians that emphasized how we look at the product we're trying to produce and how we use our skills and talents to drive us to a better, higher quality product. That was a great experience. And then I went on and took a role as medical director for innovation at the Fairview Health System. And that was a great experience, and had the opportunity to work with a team that came out of Stanford and learned about how to use design and innovation to actually create and drive new care delivery models. So we created the primary care medical home in a few clinics, and that eventually expanded into over 40 clinics in the Twin Cities. We also worked on high-risk patient treatment. What I saw in my role as an emergency physician over the years was that there were many people in the emergency department that were there not because they had an emergency. They were there because the system didn't meet their needs proactively, and we ended up dealing with lots of things in the emergency department that were actually symptoms of a broken system, not so much symptoms of an acute decompensation of the person we were trying to help. And that really inspired me to start thinking about what is it we can do differently, and drove me into this different kind of work where I really work at designing and creating and pushing for better models of care and that serve patients more effectively.
I was going to ask you really quick, going back to what you said earlier, with a more compassionate way or understanding way of doing something. We've had a couple discussions on this podcast about there's a certain amount of empathy and understanding and caring that's lacking in our culture, period. We've talked a lot on this about, we had a lady on named Nicole who was talking to us a little bit about ACA. And we kind of hit on the whole death panel idea that Sarah Palin put out there, but she said, it was one of those things that would really have saved a lot of money. And of course, giving a title like that, people shut down pretty quick. But it sounded like the idea of making sure that physicians spoke to their clients or their patients about end of year or end of life issues and saving money that way. It seemed like an aspect of the understanding and caring between a doctor and a patient that's lacking, because my assumption was towards the end of your life, you and your doctor are absolutely talking, communicating, they understand everything that you want to have happen, and that's obviously not the case to the extent that they put something into the ACA to try to get that to be an absolute part of it to save hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you say understanding and caring is something that's kind of missing from that patient and physician dynamic?
Well, what I think has happened is that is certainly the intent of good nurses and doctors, and I see it every day in the work people do. However, the business of medicine has driven us to see patients faster, to type on electronic health records, to make sure our billing is accurate, and a whole bunch of business requirements, I would say, have overwhelmed what I would call the social aspects of health and healing, which is empathy, trust, relationship, and connection. And this, has been in response to some broad, trends. The knowledge explosion has really created a challenging situation for anybody who poses as an expert in healthcare delivery, whether you're a cardiologist or a nephrologist or a family physician. Keeping up with the latest and greatest is a huge challenge and much different than 50 years ago in terms of the volume of information and the volume of treatments and the volume of medications. It's just expanded exponentially. So that has had a huge impact on our ability to focus on, again, those social aspects of health. And so that's one factor. The other factor is, as we've spent more and more money in healthcare on things, pharmaceuticals, on hospital beds, on buildings, on technology, more and more of the business model, the payment, goes to those types of activities. And so that leaves less and less for what I would call the human aspects of care delivery. And so that has had a major impact. And then the other impact that's very real is what I think you're referencing in your work, is that our society in general has become less connected. If you look at loneliness, for example, in people over age 45, it's doubled in self-reported loneliness in the last decade. And I think as families have split up and spread out, all to meet economic goals, we've lost some of the sense of community that bound us together. And I think of, in my town of 900 that I grew up in, when someone died, automatically food started showing up at the household, and there didn't have to be, any special app on someone's smartphone to make that happen. It happened because of the cohesiveness of that community, and there were aggregators in those communities around churches, or the Lions Club, or all sorts of what I would call social aggregators. And I think as we've gotten more and more pressured on the economic side of the equation, some of these social connections have just been disrupted. And it's really caused a real impact on all of us. When we look at our health and our longevity, social connection, a feeling of belonging, a sense of community has a tremendous impact on someone's longevity. In fact, there's evidence out there that it has more impact than all the medical treatments combined for a population. So I think we're dealing with those big trends, and all of us feel the impact of those trends in our day-to-day life. And I think it's important to acknowledge those trends, but not be overwhelmed by them, and begin to really contemplate, how do we get ourselves out of this mess?
And that's something that I would have never made that connection. I would never have made the connection that loneliness or not feeling part of something that very likely will get you depressed or eating poorly or all the things that can kind of go along with that. I would have never made those connections if he hadn't said that. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, social isolation is a huge risk factor for declining health and increased health costs. If you look at people who identify themselves as socially isolated, they're much higher risk for all sorts of health conditions. So, we've got a job on our hands, I would say, as a society to actually re-engage, re-promote the importance of community, the importance of family, the importance of a balanced life as opposed to running on the treadmill of the business industrial complex that we have driving us all to I'm not sure what.
I watched your TED conference talk, and the very first story that you talk about, which was kind of when I heard it, I took it as it was a very large eye opener to you, and it had to do with seeing a woman for the third time. Obviously, she'd been beat up by her husband again, and you had made a statement, a comment about, when are you going to leave this guy? And that seemed to be kind of an eye-opener to yourself as far as, am I being empathetic enough? Am I looking at people as, and this is my interpretation, basically as ones and zeros, as a problem that needed to be solved, instead of, how can I say something in the right way so that she understands it the proper way so that I can help her instead of closing things down?
Yeah, that is absolutely right. In my training, I felt very pressured to be the one who had the answer, who solved the problem, and it seemed very apparent to me that the answer was pretty easy as she laid there battered on a gurney with one eye swollen shut and a bleeding, broken hand, that, why don't you just leave this guy? Well, it's not quite that easy. And she stood up and pushed me against the wall and basically told me to go to hell. And I was just stunned, ashamed. It was not what I was so taken aback. And ultimately she left. And what I'd done basically was shamed her further because of my insensitivity to her situation. What I learned is she'd actually left her husband 3 times. She'd had restraining orders against him. She had moved her kids twice. She'd been to shelters. She's been to counseling, and she was one of those unfortunate women who is being tormented and stalked by a predator. And I went in assuming that I knew everything, and I didn't know enough. And so that really set me back, and I went out into women's shelters with a nurse that I worked with, and just spent 6 months listening to women talk about their experiences. And I told them about that experience, and that I was not proud of it. And that I signed up to be in healthcare because I wanted to help people, but clearly I didn't get it. And those women taught me some really important things about not showing up being the guy who has to tell them what to do, but how about starting with just a sense of compassion and respect. And ultimately I learned to be different. I think, in the TED Talk I go on and just talk about the fact that changed the way I approached women who were injured in my work from that time on, and learned to do simple things like ask for permission to touch them before I examined them, and just didn't assume I knew everything about them without taking time to try to understand them. And what I found ultimately is that kind of care resulted in better outcomes for patients, and it made me feel better and about the work I was doing.
Do you feel like there's so much that is out of your control as a physician? I have a friend who is a teacher, and that friend of mine has to deal with students that come in, and they simply don't have the same type of
skill set.
Well, they don't have the same type of skill set, but what they're dealing with at home, whether it be their diet, whether it be their love and compassion, or how much their parents help them with homework. There's so much that is out of your control, yet how can we balance that with how we respond to people, the treatment that we give people? I mean, we're human beings, and we're almost asked to do an almost impossible job to care for these people that come into our attention, our bubble, and we're asked to be like miracle workers. You're asked to be a miracle worker. My friend who's a teacher is asked to be a miracle worker because they have to deal with these people who are damaged goods, and you have to handle them with knit gloves or kit gloves, or what is it called? Is it kit gloves or knit gloves? I always mess that up, but it almost seems like an impossible task, because you've stated also. I wanted to ask you about this. You've made some pretty bold comments about having a position against sugary drinks and soda. And I was going to ask if you've had any blowback against that, because physicians, you're trying to help somebody with their health, and if somebody is consuming crap food, there's only so much you can do. And then we overtreat. I mean, there's so many things that you can answer from this statement that I'm making, or question. But when somebody goes to the hospital, Nikki, who had been on in our one of our first podcasts, had said, doctors and nurses almost overtreat on a regular basis because of the fear of being sued. So there's so much that we're asking for doctors to do.
There is, and actually we take on too much sometimes. There's some things we can't fix, and what I found is, rather than going in the room with the objective to give this woman an answer that she needed to leave her husband, what she actually needed from me was someone who was compassionate and cared for her and recognized that I couldn't solve her problem. It was only she that could. And I think sometimes as teachers or physicians or people in helping professions, we get so wrapped up in thinking we have to fix people that we forget to care for them. And it's pretty simple, actually. I found myself so much a better physician when I realized I couldn't fix people. What I could do was care for them and listen to them and convey a sense of understanding. The world is a very challenging place, and the older I get, the more I see and experience in my own family and my own life, and I realize how complex and difficult life is for almost everyone. And so what's amazing to me is people, kids in school or patients, really just truly appreciate being heard. And a sense of understanding. And that's what I lost sight of early in my career, because I was so pressured to feel like I needed to fix the person. And you can't fix everybody. That said, there are some things you can fix, and sometimes we get so overwhelmed trying to fix the micro problems that we don't get to the macro issues. And yes, I have come out with some statements about sugared drinks, about the food industry, about the amount of sodium in our food. And I'm not shy about that, because I just think that it's the truth. And there are countries, there's a great article in last week's New York Times about Britain, who has worked hard to decrease the amount of sodium in foods. And sodium is put in there for multiple reasons. It's put in there as a preservative. It's put in because we all seem to like the taste of it. It's put in for better texture. But Britain has worked hard, and Finland, on reducing the amount of sodium in foods, and they're starting to see that reducing sodium in food is having a dramatic impact on the incidence of death from heart attack and stroke. And we're talking 40% reductions. We're not talking minor reductions. We're talking major reductions. So, talking to patients about it in the exam room is important. In some issues demand more public awareness and actually legislative efforts to begin to regulate some of these areas that really demand a different approach. And what bothers me about our political system today is that, and the death panels is a great example, is that we don't operate from a sense of knowledge and experience and what's the right thing to do. We leap to ideology and in issues where people don't have a lot of understanding, it's very easy to paint a picture of certainty on one side or another side of an issue and really not get down to truly understanding. Would reducing sodium in our food aid the public health and reduce health costs in the United States? Yes. Is it proven? Yes. By how much? Millions. So why aren't we doing it? That's the question. And, politicians today are afraid. And they're in part afraid because the public doesn't really want to contemplate some of these more difficult problems. They want to try to live in a world of certainty on one side or another side of an issue. Frankly, good businesses, good leaders, good industries look at data, look at information, and make decisions based on that information. And there's plenty of information saying that sugar in drinks leads to obesity. Sodium in food leads to hypertension, stroke, and heart attacks. Period. There's no debate. This is a fact.
Have you ever heard of the Gerson therapy? The Gerson therapy?
I have not. No.
There's at my full-time job, I have a lot of opportunity to watch YouTube, and which is a great thing because I got to watch you. But I also came across a YouTube video which is a documentary about the cure for cancer, and they talk about the Gerson therapy, and they talk about how deadly salt and sugar and all of the poisons that we take in every day are. And I just was wondering if you had heard about that, because you have a very strong sense of what's healthy and what's not, and you don't hear that a lot. I don't ever hear that on a regular basis from physicians. I don't know if it's because they don't have the time to do it, but it just seems like we need to start taking a more holistic response to what is happening systemically to our society.
I agree with that completely. And actually, that was really my motivation for making this shift I made from being a very successful practicing physician, loved my job, loved my partners, really loved what I was doing, but deep inside there I had this drive to try to make a broader impact, and I have no idea even today what that's going to look like. But what I know is I'm honoring this inner passion, this inner commitment to talk about the things that I really think are impactful and ask some hard questions and to really dig. And there's a lot of garbage out there in terms of, this is a great thing and it's going to cure this and that. And so, we have to be aware that not all information is good information. However, there's some wonderful, really well-done studies that show us that there are some things we could do from a regulatory perspective that would have a major impact on the health of Americans and on the health of our children. And I don't know. How long are we going to pretend that isn't reality? How long are we going to pretend that these facts aren't true so that we can conveniently kill ourselves eating the crap that's in front of us? It's time. It's time for us all to begin to take some responsibility for this. And physicians can be an incredibly helpful voice. I hear those voices because I listen for them, but I would have to agree with you that much of the work that physician groups like the AMA and the Minnesota Medical Association as examples have done is good work around policy. However, I think there can be more work around public health, what's in the public's best interest, and how do we take a more active role articulating those things in a meaningful way. And so I'll keep at it.
That's good to hear. I wanted to ask you really quick, might as well just jump right into the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. You have some positive things to say about it from what I've heard. Would you say that overall you think it's a great policy? If there's something that you would, why don't we talk about what you think are the pros of the ACA, and then maybe if you have, if you feel okay about it, you can talk about things that you think you would want to change or do something different.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. I think it's really an important issue. First of all, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, I think in total are about 10 pages long, and the Affordable Care Act is about 2,200. So if that doesn't tell you about, our legislative process has gone a little out of whack,
and how much of that is pork?
Yeah, there's just, there's a lot of junk in there. Today you got to put in a paragraph for Senator X from, state Y so that he'll vote yes, and for lobbyist Y so she won't talk Senator Z into whatever. There's a lot of just, the political process is pretty messed up. That said, I think the intent of the act is good. One, the industry needed a kick in the pants. If we can't look at the fact that our health system, we spend almost 18% of our gross domestic product, more than twice than most countries, and we aren't getting better health outcomes. If we can't look that in the eye and say that's a problem, then we really aren't, as a citizenry, doing our role in a democracy. These are things that we should say, that's not right. And so the Affordable Care Act is an effort to kick the industry in the pants, and I think it's done a good job at kicking the industry in the pants. And I'll tell you some things I like about it. One of the things I like is it makes it much harder for insurance companies to use screening to not insure people who have health problems and to dump people who have health problems out of their insurance mix. And that's called pre-existing conditions and limits on treatment that for things like behavioral health and chemical dependency, because the actuaries for insurance companies know that those people are expensive and hard to manage, and it's easier to exclude them than to include them. So our insurance companies are run by actuaries, and it's not because they're evil, and it's not because I think the executives who run those companies are evil people. It's because it's business. And it's actually good business to figure out who to not insure and insure as many people as you can who aren't going to use services to pay for the people who need services. That's called insurance. And the Affordable Care Act makes it much more difficult for insurers to exclude people or kick people off, their policies because of rules that have been allowed. And I think that's a good thing. And the reason I think it's a good thing is because the consequences of people not being able to be insured who have chronic conditions or being kicked off if certain things happen have been that we have most of our bankruptcies in the United States are caused by a medical condition. And that's just wrong. So, I get that that's good business to figure out how to make an insurance company work by taking in more premiums than you pay out, and I get that that's a requirement to stay in business. However, the method that was used leaves the public holding the bag, paying for people who go on to public assistance because they are no longer insurable or go bankrupt. And there are real costs associated with those things that somebody's picking up, but they become hidden costs. They become costs we all bear and we all endure. So, they don't go away. And so what I like is the Affordable Care Act makes that much more difficult to do. So people in the healthcare industry have to actually figure out how to take care of people who are sick and make it work. And that requires us to work harder at dealing with patients with complex medical and behavioral and chemical dependency issues and figure out better models of care to take care of them rather than just figuring out how to dump them off our policy and dump them on somebody else. So I like the pre-existing condition, making it much more difficult. The individual mandate is really interesting, and that one has caused a huge ruckus, as you guys know.
Yep.
And I have mixed feelings about that, to be honest. I will say I understand the need for healthy people to participate in the system, and that's really what the individual mandate is all about. And what I think is we need to look to evidence on this one, and in Massachusetts, they had a similar approach in 2006 and 2007, and when they put their, I would just call it pre-Affordable Care Act-like policies in place in Massachusetts, what they found is that more people did sign up for health care, and when the penalties came into effect, more young people bought health insurance, and the system got more funding, more broad-based funding to take care of people who needed it. And so instead of disenfranchising people and excluding people, it becomes a more inclusive system. And the system itself is forced to adapt and figure out how to take care of these more complex patients more effectively rather than avoiding them. So those two things, I think, are strong. They're components of the law that I think most Americans, if you didn't say the word Affordable Care Act or Obamacare or whatever you want to call it, if you just said, do you think that our insurance system, our health system, should be required to take care of people who are sick? I'm quite sure most people would say yes. And I'm quite sure most people, if you said, do you think it should be okay to exclude people who are sick from the health system and, have them go bankrupt because of an illness? I'm quite sure the majority of Americans would say, no, I don't think that's a good idea. But instead, what we get is a bunch of inflammatory rhetoric over the top of what I think are the fundamental provisions of a functional health system, and that is that people have a right to receive health care. And people can do a number of things to control their health. There's some things we can't control, and excluding people from access to health care I just don't think is right.
Now, do you think that, in a way, because when I think about this, obviously this podcast is about how we are influenced day in and day out by the media, newspapers, your friends, what you see on TV. And when I sit back and think about this, I wonder why is it that in the early 1900s and before, since the dawn of time when man was here, we have been able to survive as a species. And only in the last 40, 50... Dr. Moen, are you still there?
I'm here.
You probably have a call coming in, I think.
Hello?
Yeah, Dr. Moen, I'm still here. We'll edit those beeping out. What I was getting at was, why is it, my worry, my question is, why do we feel at this point in time, what has changed where now we feel like we will not be able to survive as a species without insurance? If I were to bring up to my wife, if I were to say to my wife, now I have 3 kids, and I know I need insurance, but why is it that we have this dread? What has changed? Was it the medical field? Was it the cost of health care, or what is it that now we have this? It's almost terror. The idea of not having insurance is almost a terror-driven idea that we have to have it, or else we're all going to perish.
That's a really interesting question. I've never really quite thought about it that way, but one of the things that comes to mind to me is that fear is a major part of sort of this healthcare equation, and we've marketed to our healthcare system sort of mitigating fear of death and disease and being maimed and et cetera. And I think there's just more fear because of what's in the media. Growing up, I didn't see a lot of violent media, and I guess I wasn't hearing 24/7 about children in Syria being chemically poisoned and all these things that have been happening in the world forever. And yet today we shine a light on the travesties of humanity in a way that I think magnifies that part of the human experience. I'm the first to acknowledge it's real and it happens. However, I think we've magnified the intensity of the downside of human life. And I think that we've positioned our health system as there to mitigate it. So I think that creates this really emotional response to, gee, if I get hurt and I don't have insurance, I won't have access to care, and I'll end up in some position I saw on a TV show about a leg bleeding and it'll be horrible. And I just think we've sort of hyped up what the health system can do, the problems in the world that need to be mitigated by our health system. I think we've deluded ourselves into thinking we actually have some degree of control over many things that we actually don't have control over. And so insurance, is a way of thinking, oh, well, I've got that risk taken care of. And so I think we're just overall more hyped up, more afraid, more ramped up about what's wrong with the world. And I think in large part because of the media. I think in our fascination with it is what fascinates me. And, we really thrive on seeing that stuff, which is really amusing to me because I find it to be damaging, actually. And I find I am just not a big news watcher. I'm not a big internet cruiser looking for the latest stories about, all the horrible things in the world. I've found that there's just too much of that and that it's not productive. And it gets to a level of being too much. And I think that we've just, like I say, deluded ourselves into thinking we have more control over the world than we actually do, and that makes all these decisions seem to be really highly consequential. And we've lost sight of just some of the simple human things that we need to pay attention to.
I think part of for me personally, I had to file bankruptcy at 23 because when I was 18 in California, I had my appendix out and I didn't have insurance. And I think it cost me, I think it was about $15,000, which sounds pretty cheap compared to today's prices. But, and so when I was 18, that happened. I thought I was on my mom's insurance because I was still 18. And 4 or 5 years later, all of a sudden I'm in Iowa, not in California anymore. And I get a phone call that my wages are garnished and all these things are happening. And I was just in complete shock. And so the only way
you were getting, there was a percentage. I mean, it had increased. There was a rate increase, right? Because you were being penalized because you hadn't paid anything on something you had no idea about.
Right. And so I literally couldn't live anymore because they were taking so much of my wages to go towards this item. Now, obviously, it's part of my irresponsibility on my part. But I think that's one of those fears that those things can happen to you, that all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're half of America is one paycheck away from being, in the dumper or losing your house or things like that. So I think that's where the fear comes from. I'm not a big worrier, so that's probably part of my problem is I didn't even see it coming because I thought it was all taken care of and I was all good. But I think that's part of the fear that's generated is that could happen to you. And if you have a wife and 3 kids and a house and car payments and all of a sudden you hear something happens like that, I mean, that's scary.
I would completely agree. Yeah, exactly. And when you get in the system and you need something, the costs just pile up at amazing rate, and the consequences of that are huge. So I agree. I think it's multifactorial, like about everything. We're marketed to, we're overwhelmed with media and the consequences of not being insured or the consequences of having an accident are much different. I think I look at our justice system, and when I was growing up, the way kids who got in trouble were treated compared to the way they're treated today. It's like we have the FBI in every school today. And if a kid did something stupid when I was growing up, like got caught drinking or went out and vandalized the house and broke some windows or something, it didn't maim them for the rest of their life. And I see the way some kids are treated when they make mistakes, which everybody's going to make mistakes, it just turns into just a feeding frenzy. And I think we're over responding to what are human frailties. And again, I think we've deluded ourselves into believing that degree of control is going to make the world a better place. In some ways it does, in other ways it doesn't. And you got to strike a balance on these things with regard to how we enforce, how we punish, how we respond to people that make mistakes like not having insurance and having your appendix out. Has a huge consequence when it's a $30,000 bill. And 40 years ago, it was probably a $900 bill, and you probably could move to a different state and no one would ever find you.
Right.
Well, today they're going to find you.
Right.
So, it's just it's a different, we just have a different view of these things, and I'm not sure all of it's healthy.
I have a question we have a gentleman who's on our show quite a bit. His name's Rocky. He's our go-to libertarian. That's one of our buddies that's on here pretty regularly. But one of his feelings was that, is it moral to threaten people to be part of this program? Where if I don't pay taxes to have the Affordable Care Act to function, I'm going to go to jail. Or if I refuse to be part of the insurance programs, I just opt out, and
you're punished.
You're punished for that. And so he has concerns about the morality of ACA in forcing people to pay for insurance, or forcing people to pay taxes to pay for the ACA. And I mean, I've heard in the past people have said things, well, we have insurance. You have to have insurance for your car. So wouldn't you think that your own personal insurance would be, even more moral than having car insurance? But what are your thoughts about the morality of ACA?
That's a good question, and I honestly am not quite sure, like I said in the very beginning, what to think about the individual mandate. What I would love is if we had a reasonable system that people wanted to be part of because it worked for them, and I know that's a little Pollyannish. I think some of this more rigorous regulatory stuff was put into place to get the system headed in a different direction and try to create some sort of economic platform for the whole thing. So there were reasons that was done, and I think sometimes it's convenient to think that because you don't have insurance and you don't need insurance, that if something happens to you, you'll take care of it. And the truth is, that's not usually what happens. So, people often don't plan for things, and things like insurance can help buffer that if they're good systems and they're ethical and they work well. And, there's evidence from other countries where people are guaranteed access to health care that overall their costs are lower and their health is better. And it's not great evidence, but there's evidence that that universal access to healthcare, to basic healthcare services, has a positive impact on people and on a society. And I think that the founding principles of the United States are wonderful: the independence, the autonomy, and we broke away from some of that regulatory world and tried to establish a country that was more free, and you were free and needed to take more responsibility. But the bottom line is, a lot of people don't take the responsibility that comes with freedom. And they don't consider the fact that if they have a health condition and go bankrupt, somebody's paying for it. and may not be them, but those costs are real, and they're more hidden, more diffused, harder to find, but there are consequences to that.
And so when people see the increase in their health, like we just had a 10% increase in healthcare at my job for people who had health insurance, and they're, for lack of a better word, blaming it on the Affordable Care Act, that's why our insurance premiums are going up. Now, would you say then that because we're paying more for our premiums, we're actually in the long run going to help offset some of those costs because of all the hidden things that we don't see that are involved? And would that be a legitimate way to look at it? Because, I mean, of course, everybody else just sees the bottom line, their pocketbook is being hit one more time.
Well, first I would say before the Affordable Care Act, your premiums were going up at that pace or greater, so I'm not sure we can attribute today's increases to the Affordable Care Act when increases preceded the Affordable Care Act, which were extremely impressive.
Okay.
But I think it's a symptom of a broader disease. I think it's convenient to blame it on the Affordable Care Act. Do I think overall the costs are less if we provide a good system that people have universal access to? I actually do believe that. I don't think universal access to what we have today in terms of a healthcare system is going to lower the cost. In fact, I think it might even make it more expensive. So some of what I work on is what are the subpopulations of people today that are really, really expensive and not getting what they need. And the light immediately shines on frail elders, people with disabilities, that don't have great access to the system and end up bouncing in and out of our hospitals and emergency departments. And they are what I call an underserved, over-serviced population, and they're very expensive. And, so I'm not so great at the big math of knowing whether it's all going to get fixed if we do the Affordable Care Act. What I've spent more time on is where are we spending most of our money, and where is it not giving us much value? And where is there high degrees of variation that are interesting? Like, why does it cost $120,000 on average for a person to die in New York City or Los Angeles or Miami, and under $50,000 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and Rochester, New York? Why is that?
It's great that you brought that up, because that was a wonderful segue into a question I was going to ask you, which is why is it we're focusing, or so many people are wrapped up because of the media, because of the news, and making it sexy to argue about Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. We're focusing so much on how to pay the bill, where there was a New York Times article that talked about why the bills are high to begin with. Why is it that when somebody goes into the hospital, they're paying $5 for one Advil? Why is it that, just like what you were saying, why is it more expensive to die in one area of the country than it is the other area of the country? And should we be focused more on, do you think, the costs of health care instead of how are we going to pay for this? Because what I love about what you're doing, you're really attacking or trying to improve the empathy. And when I think about medical health care, I think of 4 categories: the cost of care, the knowledge of care, is the doctor, is the nurse really looking at the patient and giving them that quality of care and knowledge that, hey, I know what you've done to yourself. I know what's happening to you. This is what you need to do to fix yourself. That's one category. Then you have the empathy, which I think you're addressing beautifully. And then there's the legalization. There's the legal category where doctors and nurses, there is a small part of you, or a large part, where they're nervous about being sued for malpractice. And that changes how you interact with your patients. All of that does. Your patients are very untrusting because of what they see in the news, and they don't know what to believe with the Affordable Care Act. So what you were talking about with it being more or less expensive to die in certain places, I mean, when you look into that, what do you come up with, and how do you make sense of all that?
Well, it's really interesting, and part of what I'm trying to do is, yes, there is a business case for empathy, so there's good literature saying being more empathic helps, and compassion is an important part of care, especially when people have a chronic disease or are in a terminal condition. It's really critical. But the other thing is, let's look at the data. Let's pretend that we have a problem to solve and that we're going to look at data. And I'm fascinated by just the variation. When you have high degrees of variation, you start to wonder why. And so if you look at New York City, Miami, Los Angeles versus La Crosse, Wisconsin, or Rochester, New York, or Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Dayton, Ohio, which are kind of middle-of-the-road cities, you see a couple things. One, more people die in intensive care units in high-cost cities. More specialists see people at the end of life, and they have better access to specialty care, so they live where more specialist doctors live. So that comes through. And then you see things which are really interesting is within markets you see variation. Even within individual physician practices you see variation from one provider to the next. And a lot of this has to do with the complexity of what we're dealing with here. And so, it isn't as simple as one thing. It's multifactorial. Basically, the conclusions I've come to is there's too much variation, and there's a lot that we can learn from cities that have low variation, and we need to really dig in and understand what those cities have done differently. So La Crosse, Wisconsin is fascinating to me because for 25 years, or 20 years, I think, I know it's over 20, they've had a program called Respecting Choices. And what that program does is initiate advanced care planning conversations in that community. And in La Crosse, Wisconsin, over 98% of people who die have an advanced directive that clarifies what it is they wish to happen as they come to the end of their life. And in La Crosse, Wisconsin, they've worked for over 20 years through their churches, through community organizations, through their two health systems there, Gunderson and St. Francis, and they've established a standard that this conversation is ethical, moral, and appropriate. And oh, by the way, they're one of the lowest cost places in the United States to die. And oh, by the way, people who live there don't rate their dying experience as horrible. And it doesn't mean we're killing people off or having death panels. All it means is we're honoring what people desire. It doesn't mean we're withholding care. It means we're actually having a conversation about what people want. What I've learned in my career is people often get more than they want. I'm struck by how many people I worked with over my career who were getting treatments they really didn't want because no one really stopped to ask them what they want. And it's not about withholding care or death panels. It's about actually respecting people's autonomy, their ability to make decisions, and making sure they're informed. There's great literature and research out there showing for the right patients where cancer treatment is stopped earlier, they live longer and have a better quality of life than those who get treated and treated and treated and die. So the right thing to do is to identify when treatments are no longer doing any good and to be honest with a patient about what's best for them and let them make a decision about how they want to proceed. And I am amazed. Patients usually know what they want and what's right if they have the information to make the decision.
Well, that
I love that in La Crosse, the community took this on. It wasn't just, in the doctor's office, because a doctor can't have a conversation with every single person in a community. It's community-wide work that they've embraced, and we took that on in the Twin Cities, and there's a program here called Honoring Choices, and you can go to honoringchoices.org and look at that. It's a great program led by the Twin Cities Medical Society, and it's been supported in a broad-based way across the community. And what's fascinating that we've learned through Honoring Choices is that the faith leaders and faith communities are great places for people to feel safe and supported in expressing what it is they desire to, what they desire their life experience to be like, which is what it's all about. And for many people, what they want is to be surrounded by people they love, to feel comfortable and not have pain, and to be in their own home and have peace and quiet. And that's not 92 years old having heart surgery laying in an ICU, I'll guarantee you that.
I guess that's where I get my frustration starts coming in, because if we're really going to focus on saving costs and making changes, and in my mind also adding a more human way of approaching things, like you said, with understanding and empathy, but that's exactly that part of the Affordable Care Act that was cut out, that was labeled as a death panel. So it was going to save hundreds of millions of dollars. It was the idea of a compassionate doctor having an understanding conversation with their patient for their end of their life care. I mean, it seems like to me, it's just such a no-brainer and seems so simple. And the idea that such a simple idea of two people having a conversation and coming to an agreement could save us that much money, that was hijacked kind of and turned into, I mean, to me, right there, that's a great thing just to pass a bill, just to have that right there all by itself and not be part of the Affordable Care Act. Just have that be a standalone thing that's just right there. It's going to save us hundreds of millions of dollars. So why not have that just be...
Well, I think that would be a wonderful thing, just to be in the teaching of future physicians. I mean, that should be in the colleges.
Oh, maybe it is. Dr. Moen, is that part of your education when you became a doctor? Is that an aspect of it?
It is, but not to the degree that I needed it. I mean, I was woefully underprepared for that conversation, and there's good literature out there to show that physicians are, and part of the Honoring Choices program at the Twin Cities Medical Society actually has promoted better education for physicians and nurses and others who work in healthcare around this issue. The thing that I think we need to be careful of, and probably your libertarian friend would weigh in on this one, is, some of this work actually belongs in the community and can't really be legislated. La Crosse, Wisconsin didn't have a legislative mandate. They decided it was in the best interest of their community, and they did it. And some of the greatest work that emerges from the community itself. And so I think it's something that many people could do, can do, will do. Programs like this are expanding, whether it be Respecting Choices in La Crosse or Honoring Choices in the Twin Cities. There are organizations interested in this. If you want it in your community, you can have it. And I will tell you, it's not doctors' work. Doctors need to support it and be part of the whole movement, but this is really community work. It's what do we want for our community? Well, I think it's a pretty white hat strategy to say what we want for our community is for people to be able to choose how they experience the end of their life and to have those needs honored.
I'm not exactly sure why I feel this way, Dr. Moen, but I feel like we had that. We had that type of churches helping out with with patients back in the 50s and 60s. Not only during that time, but in the past we had organizations stepping up and being more part of a community effort to keep people healthy and to take care of the elderly and take care of people because we knew it was the right thing to do instead of it being a mandate. And then we somehow got away from that. And like just exactly what you're saying is it's like we're being reawakened to the fact that we need that. Instead of being told or punished for not doing something, we all need to wake up to the fact that we need each other and we need to start looking out for each other, that community aspect.
Absolutely. That is, I look to my boys who are in their 20s and young men like you and others in your generation to realize that and to start thinking about what does that look like in a way that appeals to your generation. And I think the millennials are fascinating as a group because what I see is this deeper search for meaning. And I, as a boomer, can say that I think after we had our, little freak out stage in the 60s, we sort of settled down into this notion that more is better. My success depends on me running on this treadmill that looks like this. My participation in the community is less important than my participation in whatever I'm doing to get a paycheck. And getting a paycheck has become harder, and the income inequality has made it a larger and larger part of our U.S. population having to work harder and harder for less and less. And we've created what I think is an unsustainable cycle of inequality, inequity, that is fueling this whole thing. And I'm looking to your generation to begin to figure this out. And what I'm trying to do in my chair is use some of my gray hair and experience to try to articulate the problem in a way that's less fearful and less blameful and shameful and more thoughtful and hopeful and data-driven, really, about this problem. I think we've over-emotionalized and distracted ourselves and avoided some of the tough questions, and when we start asking the tough questions, we find the answers are right in front of us. And you're pointing to it. Our communities need to get reknitted. And the safety net that we experienced in the 60s and 50s and had to do with a cultural fabric that was woven through our faith and our churches and our community organizations, and those things have taken a back seat, and we're paying the price.
Well, I was reading your blog, and I was intrigued with Dr. George, is it Tyler, and
Yep.
and John Sloan, and some of the things that they're doing. It sounds very much like lacrosse. They're getting groups of people together and working together to kind of solve some of these problems.
Yeah, and that's what I've done the last 5 years is I've gotten out onto the landscape a little bit in the national scene. Is one, I found out I wasn't the only physician feeling this way. Two, I found out that there were lots of physicians not choosing to be overwhelmed by it and sit in the doctor's lounge and whine about it, but actually start to step up and do things about it. And there's some tremendously exciting new models of care that are really all about re-engaging a patient's social network and support system, all about re-engaging the team of providers needed to care for people. And so much of what people need in certain circumstances is not medical care. It's actually social care, and it's nursing care, and it's compassion and being supported, and it's being able to stay in your home because you're fortunate to have someone come and visit once a day, and then you don't have to go into the nursing home. It's some of these just basic things that need to be reintegrated into the way we think about our health and well-being, and they need to be supported both just in the way we think about ourselves and how we relate to our community, and they also need to be reimagined in the way we think about how the health system operates.
How do you think that would work? I mean, it's easy for me to think about that being a Midwestern and living in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. What would it be when you have a community of 15 million in New York City? I mean, I wonder how some of these ideas, which appeal tremendously to me of what you're saying, how do you think they could work those into populations that are so dense and have just so many people?
In some ways they can work better because density actually brings efficiency that is really interesting. And Jeff Brenner is a physician in Camden, New Jersey, which is one of the poorest cities in the United States. And he's been written about in the New Yorker, and wonderful guy, and he's a friend of mine, and we've done a lot of work together the last few years. And Jeff went to the data and realized that in Camden, New Jersey, where there were tons of uninsured people and people on Medicaid, that there were 4 or 5 large high-rises in Camden full of people spending a huge amount of the healthcare dollar in that city. And that much of it was uncompensated care that the hospitals were writing off as bad debt. Much of it was Medicaid and other payment care that hospitals were having a difficult time making money seeing patients with Medicaid coverage. And what he did is begin to build care delivery models that were based in those buildings where the majority of people who were in that situation lived. And he established a community worker model in those buildings where a community worker and a team of providers became part of the social fabric of that building. And it was really the density of the population that allowed them to get some aggregation of meaningful services. And the hospitals supported this because they were dealing with uncompensated care and certainly wanted people to be cared for somewhere else besides their emergency department. And ultimately what Jeff demonstrated with what's called hotspotting in a city was that in certain geographic concentrations, there's a high number of people that are overutilizing the healthcare system, not necessarily because they want to, but because we haven't proactively identified what are the drivers of healthcare spending among that population and what are solutions that actually address some of the issues that are the drivers of those costs. And the drivers ended up being lots of social and behavioral issues. And the community workers that worked in those buildings weren't handing out drugs for high blood pressure. They were actually working directly with families and seeing that children were taken care of, and some of the real basics of what we would consider in Midwestern Iowa to be normal life. And what he demonstrated is that's actually what that community needed was social care, and that it actually can be done efficiently in a city because those populations tend to aggregate. I think what's more daunting to me is what we're going to do about rural America. I was just in Texas with a group in Dallas, and one of the physicians told me that in his mom's hometown in West Texas, the town of 2,000, they have one doctor, and he's 77 years old, and there's no one coming behind him. And rural America is where it's much more challenging because you don't have a density of population, and you can end up with real hard time recruiting people to come and work in those areas, and now we have a preponderance of older folks in some of these communities, and it's daunting to think about, how we're going to meet the needs of that population. That said, what's interesting about West Texas is that my friend Dr. Crow said that in his mom's town, it wasn't whether you were Democrat or Republican, it was whether you were Baptist or Methodist. And he said they're just deep faith communities in those communities. And I think, some of the social disintegration that's happened in our cities and suburbs in some of these rural locations, there's still more of that social integration that naturally supports some of these people. So, maybe, and we're working on in Texas actually, a model for rural America that emphasizes the role of the community, the role of nurses, and the support of physicians. If we don't have a physician in that town, how do we get the right kinds of physicians who can support providers that are in those communities that'll provide care and actually provide the social support that these people need and the medical support. So I think the rural areas are really pose a challenge.
How do you think we get people to be pulled in for some of those social things? I mean, if the social lives are hindered now, and it's obviously having a medical effect on us as human beings in our society, what do you think? And this is a really big question, but we're asking you to solve a lot of the world's problems tonight. But
we appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, it's kind of hard to. I mean, Matt and I are CrossFitters, and one thing that we love about doing it is the community that we're in. That's one of the biggest draws for us, and the people who we know that are also part of the gym that we're at. That's one of the, besides getting a good workout in, it's the community that we're part of. And obviously it's something that's lacking. I'm not a very religious person at all, but I understand the idea of fellowship and how appealing that is. So what do you think are some things that we can kind of help, like you say, reknit some of this social fabric that has become kind of tattered? Do you have any personal thoughts about how you would approach that?
I really do. I think it's exactly what you're doing. It's finding something that you care about and finding those that care about it with you and creating points of aggregation that people can get together and share experiences and learn together. And, I realize not everybody's religious and, that religion comes with its own set of baggage. That I think, there's lots of evidence that there's less appeal in your generation for some of the traditional approaches to religion, and I completely understand that. That said, a sense that I'm going to be better off personally, my well-being is going to be better if I'm socially connected, and that is a huge part of my own health. So how do I seek that out? How do I promote that in the community in which I live? We had just an example of that in my community. We had some boys that my son was friends of who lost their fathers, or three of them in 1 year. And we ended up deciding to raise some money and build a park in our community in their honor. And it took the kids all worked for about 3 years to raise the funds and did the project. And it was a community builder. It was a community building event, and it was done because it was the right thing to do, and it created a social fabric among those kids, and especially for those that lost their dads. It created a support mechanism, and it didn't have to be in a church, and it didn't have to be mandated by the federal government. It just had to be thought of, and it took some community people to decide it was the right thing to do, and you just had to start. And I think there's so much that we individually can do. And sometimes we wait for somebody else to solve this problem when what we really need is for everybody to decide to take some responsibility for it in their own way. And I love the fitness focus and, getting yourself around how do we create a culture of fit people who all enjoy training and enjoy this type of activity. That's wonderful. What a great thing. It can be as simple as a running club. It can be, deciding to raise money for something in your community and creating, a movement toward that. These are the things that I think just promote health. They promote community. They promote well-being, and we all can do something about it.
Well, this is one reason why this podcast has morphed into something that I really never thought it would be. But I came in tonight thinking we were going to be having a discussion with you about the Affordable Care Act and pros and cons and different aspects, and we've definitely hit on that. But I never thought that I would be coming away tonight with the idea that forming better social networking with people and communicating with people and getting involved in my community might be one of the best things I can do for my health. I mean, that's just something that I would have thought would be an aspect of it. I mean, I think that I get my community from Matt, and so he and I talk all the time because we hang out together all the time and our kids are friends. But and the idea of not having him in my life would be something pretty tragic because I get so much from my social interaction from him. But I never thought that it would be to the point where it would affect my health.
Yeah,
that's pretty. It's kind of mind-boggling for me. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't function because you weren't around anymore.
No,
God
that's actually
knows
what would happen.
I'd probably be much better off in some areas. But I think that's such an interesting point to think about. And I don't know we talk about shit all the time, but the idea that we've never ever thought with the idea that community could be an intricate part of our lives.
Well, it's not surprising to me that with the advancement in technology, with the internet, with laptops and gaming systems, and how we've really gone back into our homes to almost hibernate day in and day out, how that has correlated with our rise of health issues. When I was a kid, I'm sure, Dr. Moen, when you were a child, your parents probably said, in the summertime, go out and play, the sun's up, don't come home till it's dark. Something to that effect. Whereas now, I really have to fight tooth and nail to get my kids off the Xbox and, hey, go out and play with your friends. Where when I was a kid, I was glad to be out that door on my bike, playing basketball, running around, making forts, being active. And it seems like with the advancement of technology, it's really coinciding with the decline in our health.
Agreed. I'm doing a project in Bogota, Colombia, with their Minister of Health, and it's fascinating. I've done a fair amount of research about Colombia. They spend 1/10 what we do on healthcare. Their life expectancy is virtually the same. And they're beginning to see increase in deaths from cardiovascular disease and diabetes and the conditions that affect an advanced society. And as we look at the globalization of our Western way of life and technology, certainly there's some upsides. But when you look at the health of a country like Colombia, which probably a lot of Americans would think is a third world country, they're in danger of health decline because of the export of some of the things that we've valued into a culture that has been operating in more of a position of scarcity from a material perspective, but probably in a milieu of relative richness when it comes to relationships and community. And my wife and I have thought a lot about this. We're both Scandinavians. I'm Norwegian and she's Swedish. So we went back to Norway and Sweden, and it was interesting to observe that the common good seemed to supersede what's in it for me. And as we reflected on that, we just couldn't help but think about the harsh climate and some of the history there, that people likely had to depend on each other to survive in more intensive ways. And you find in cultures of scarcity, people tend to learn how to work together to survive in ways that translate to all sorts of things long-term and culturally, and beliefs and ways of thinking. And I think when we are in a country of abundance, we convince ourselves that we don't need other people. And what we need is our TV and our laptop and our smartphones and our Xboxes, and that's going to make us happy. And all evidence points the other direction when you look at it, that some of this abundance takes us away from the very things that make life abundant.
I went into this talk with preconceived ideas, and to think that we've gone down this avenue of more of a holistic, be more connected with the community, has really shocked me. And I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you have an opinion on this or not, or if you've looked into this at all or not, but recently on the Joe Rogan's podcast, he's talked about the power of ayahuasca and marijuana and hallucinogenic drugs. Have you come across anything in your term as a physician, as a healer, have you seen any benefits to any of those things to be more? And when I say that, he brings it up in a way that makes it feel more like a community type thing of going back to the basics of understanding your past, and instead of being excluded from the whole and self-medicating in your home.
Well, first I want to be very clear about the fact that I did not inhale. That's for my friends at Luther College. I have read quite a bit about ayahuasca, and it's fascinating. And I haven't tried that particular drug. I think it is fascinating. I think some of what fascinates me about it is the ritual nature of it. I'm not sure about the hallucinogenic nature of it. I've seen some pretty harmful things come when people take psychedelic drugs, and I'm really not a proponent of that per se. However, I think the ritual of it is interesting, and I think it one of the things that I think is really holding us back right now as a culture and as a society is the under-engagement of our creative nature. And I think that our education system has beat that out of us pretty well. And I believe that some of these psychedelic experiences, while they certainly can be dangerous, I think you talk to people like Steve Jobs, and he says that his hallucinogenic experience turned out to be very important in re-engaging his creative side. And so what I say, what I come down on, is I'm not a real proponent of hallucinogens. However, I am a big proponent of creativity, and I think that engaging creativity and rituals and art and events that celebrate human creativity are incredibly important. And we have undervalued that as an important part of everyday life, as an important part of our educational experience. And I am working on re-engaging my own creativity, and that's some of the work I do is how do we think about this problem creatively as opposed to resistively and in a constrained way.
I appreciate your honest response to that. That was awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Do you have any upcoming speaking engagements, anything like we can promote for you?
Not public, but I'm talking about doing another TEDx, so I may show up on TEDx again. I love to engage with people. I love this kind of conversation, the thoughtfulness of it. I'm just trying to think, I'm going to be in a number of venues, but most of them at this stage are private venues where I'm hired to come and talk to a company, or I don't think I have any public things. I am headed that direction. I've been writing a book for like 24 years now. So I think someday it might come out. And I encourage people to read my blog and comment and subscribe.
What's your address for your blog?
It's blog.netclinic.com.
Okay. Yeah,
and,
I really enjoy. I liked your blog. I really enjoyed reading those. It's simple and concise and gives some great little stories that you have on there.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do is combine stories with data. You need both, and so compelling stories that tug at your heart are great. And what's the data tell us about how that story relates to the problem we're trying to solve? It's a both and I can tell a good story, and I try to tell stories that articulate the meaning of data and information that we have about the problem that's meaningful. So the story is really meant to articulate in a human way a situation that's occurring as a consequence of a system failure that we can see in the data. And so I've learned over the years that you need both. Great stories are fantastic if they articulate something meaningful in terms of a problem we're trying to solve, and if you have data to back that up, they're even better.
All right. Well, we will have links on our website to your TED Talks, to your blog,
to your website.
To your website as well.
www.moenmdconsulting.com. If you want, you provide market trend analysis and strategy, physician engagement strategies, performance management, system development and implementation, high-risk patient management program development and assessment, and you also provide keynote and panel presentations.
Yep, I do a lot of stuff. And somebody said, Dave, pick your niche, you'll make a lot more money. And I keep struggling with the fact that there's so much to learn and so many fascinating things. I haven't really picked my niche per se, and I've been very fortunate to get to do work that interests me. And I would tell you what I tell my kids. I have 3 boys, and they're great guys, and I tell them, as hokey as it sounds, it took me a while to have the courage to follow what I was passionate about with every bone in my body, but I finally feel like I'm headed in that direction, and I'm over 50 years old, and I tell them to strive to do that earlier and pay your rent, and that's a dance. How do you make a living doing what you're passionate about, and how do you strike a balance there is the work of human existence. And the more you pay attention to those passions on the inside and you feed them one way or another, maybe you got to get a paycheck doing something that isn't perfect for a while, but keep feeding your passion. And that's what I sense you guys are doing with this show. and with your relationship with each other and your families as you're feeding a passion that you have, which I think is fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate
that.
We do definitely appreciate that. But we really want to thank you for your time, man. We're very excited. We appreciate your openness because it was, again, on a whim that I told my wife that I think this podcast gives me a larger set of cojones that I normally would, because she talked about you, and I thought, geez, I'll just send him an email and see what he says. And you responded the next morning, and I can't let you know how much we appreciate that.
Yeah, and anytime you want to come back on, tell us about what's happening with you and
your book, when your book comes out.
Yeah, when you're done writing your book.
There you go.
You can also follow Dr. David Moen on Twitter at David Moen, Moen, MD. You can follow him on Twitter. So, Dr. David Moen, thank you very much for being on tonight. Truly enjoyed hearing from you and talking with you, and hopefully someday meeting you.
Well, let's connect again, guys. I appreciated the opportunity.
All
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Have a good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Dude, that was fantastic.
I really enjoyed him.
I mean, and my first thought was when he said, I want to keep in touch with you guys, I was like, sweet, let's do it. Oh, that's awesome. Because, I mean, I feel like we have access to somebody who really has a really deep knowledge and understanding about what he's talking about, and coming from a perspective that really is, because I even felt myself becoming too pessimistic and too negative in my comments and my questioning, and he would turn it around into, I think we need to start doing these things together in this way to help each other out. I like that.
It really emphasized to me the fact that we have to stop thinking about the government as if we're relying on them to make change.
Right.
We absolutely cannot expect the government to make change for us. If we see a problem in the world, or if we don't like the living conditions or the circumstances to which we are living in, we have to come together as a community and change it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And whatever hurdles are presented to us, we have to work through them and show other people that you're able to get over those hurdles. And hey, look what we did.
Right.
Look over here. Here's a problem that happens to a lot of people. We got over it.
Yeah.
That type of
But
thing.
just what a great interview. That was fantastic.
I really enjoyed him a lot.
I want to read his book too. If he ever gets his book done, it's been 24 years. So if he ever gets his book done, I want to read it, because if he writes like he talks, it's kind of intriguing.
And I want to meet his dogs. Obviously, he's got some dogs, which you all heard in the back.
That's what makes the podcast. It's what it is.
That's
awesome.
life.
Exactly.
That's
Nothing is
That's
perfect.
somebody hanging out at home. And
he was nice enough to do that. So God bless his dogs.
Really appreciate that. So for the Primal Scream tonight, I just wanted to say a big shout out to Dr. David Moen.
Yeah.
Really appreciate what you're doing and trying to influence our current medical field and kind of push them in the right
In a compassionate, data-driven way. That's the way I would put it.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was pretty fantastic.
And going after your dreams.
Yeah.
He's doing something that he says finally at this point in his life, he feels like he is on the actual road to doing the stuff that he is totally passionate about and living his dream.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
That is awesome. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Matt.
I am Todd. Oh, damn it.
Damn it. We almost did it again.
You can follow us easily. I'd say nowadays, since we're doing the video podcast, you go on YouTube and you type in the Primal Scream Podcast, and you'll see a bunch of things pop up. Only the last three, after the three, including this one, you can actually watch us on the podcast. Before that, it'll just be audio.
Yeah, you can go to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, go to our YouTube channel and subscribe and follow us there. Go to theprimalscream.org, and you can like us on Facebook from there. Follow us on Twitter. Instagram will be starting up pretty soon. I'm trying to get that started.
iTunes,
Stitcher.
There's
like
a
us.
donation button. And you know what? I was gonna talk to you about this, but I might as well just fucking say it on the air. That's how you work it. You drop it on air. That way you can't say no. You've heard about Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
You know what? We need to set something up.
No fucking way.
Here's the thing. If you want to donate
Somebody just stole hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin.
Listen.
until it's a proven thing, I'm all for it. I think it's awesome.
If you want to donate Bitcoins to us, I want to set something up on our website that if they want to help us out donation-wise and you want to do it with Bitcoin,
okay,
fuck it. Why not?
I'll take a 1/27th of a Bitcoin. Absolutely. I'm down.
It just means you care. That's what I like about it. I'm just trying to diversify. It's all
right.
There's a
I get
donation
it.
button. There's all this stuff.
Yeah, I get it. No problem.
Have we hit everything? Have we
I think
hit
you
all the
covered it.
different
I think we covered it all
avenues?
and then some. Yep, I think we're set.
Hey, and pretty soon you'll be seeing our sponsor. So we'll be advertising for him pretty soon.
Awesome.
So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. So I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
And we'll see you later.
Adios.
Good night. I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
And we'll see you later.
Good night. Oh, sorry. Fucking do it again. God, what the hell? You're the one who messes that up. You're the one who messes that up, not me. So I don't know what happened.
I'm not editing nothing. This is almost live.
Almost. You need to edit that. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
We'll see you later.
You say good night. I say adios.
I say we'll see you later. You say adios. And I
Adios.
say good night. Do we need to rehearse this?
I feel like I'm retarded. I haven't even
All right.
anything.
Yeah. So I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
And we'll see you later.
Adios.
Good night.